Hello, my name is Marian Dalk. I'm the Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education State Program Assistant and Small Farm Outreach Program with Virginia Cooperative Extension, and I am for the soil because the soil is our soul.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of For the Soil, a Conversation. I'm your host, Jeff Ishee, and joining me, Mary Sketch Bryant with the Virginia Soil Health Coalition and Eric Bendfeldt with Virginia Cooperative Extension Community Viability. Hello to you and to all of our listeners. We want to thank you for listening to this podcast. We greatly appreciate it, and of course, we encourage everyone to visit the website forthesoil.org. Eric, if you would introduce our returning guest.
Yes, Jeff, we're very pleased to have Nicole Masters with us again. Nicole's a noted teacher and trainer and the founder and director of Integrity Soils, and she'll be coming to Virginia in December this year and be speaking and providing some training at the 2024 Virginia Farm to Table Conference. And so we're very pleased to have you, Nicole, and really be interested in how you define yourself for people that aren't familiar with the term agroecology. What does that mean, and what is an agroecologist?
Yeah, it's a good question because for 10 years of my career, I didn't realize that was what I was until I came through some literature and went, I'm not a soil scientist. What we're doing is much more ecologically based in terms of looking at entire farm systems, including the human dynamic. And then how do we produce food in that? So it's really placing food in through an ecological lens. And not that I'm biased at all, but I do think that this is the future of agriculture.
I'd like for our listeners to be aware of your website, number one. It's found at integritysoils.com. A lot of content, a lot of resources available at that website. And I'd also want to make sure that our listeners are aware of your book. It's entitled For the Love of Soil, Strategies to Regenerate Our Food Production Systems. Can you just kind of go over the outline of the book and what readers can expect?
Thanks, Jeff. I got asked for a long time to write a book on a soils for dummies, and there's nothing dumb about soil. It's incredibly complex, and it's such a moving piece right now. There's so much research coming out about soil and microbiological and communication. But what I wanted to do is actually write a book that producers wouldn't fall asleep reading, that we would take some of this complex science and make it really conversational. And that's the feedback I get from people, is they just really appreciate how readable it is. So although we cover quite a lot of technical information and thinking about these interactions, is this a mineral or a microbial issue? What is the role of organic matter and carbon in building soil? How do microbiology contribute to this? It's all of this interweaving that I think really deepens people's ability to diagnose what's going on their own piece of land and then be able to take actions for themselves. I mean, my key driver with this book is how do we close the loop so that you don't need any external inputs. So we find even some of the largest scale cropping operations I've worked on can become incredibly profitable because everything that they're doing at that point is profit.
And Nicole, at the end of the last episode, you mentioned, we're asking producers to do something different in with what you're explaining in your book, and when you go on farms with farmers, it is something different. So how do you work with farmers, and how do you suggest they think about risk? We know that soil health regeneration, it pays in the long term, but there is a risk component. There is that initial challenge.
Yeah. It's so interesting because sometimes I think I have a format and then I'll have a producer that just totally blows the rules out of the window and we get phenomenal results. So I think it's always this case by case basis, but I think being aware of what the risk factor is when I'm working with somebody, like if you're so in the red, then where's a place to start? So we have what we call and don't tell anyone this, but we call it the methadone program, right? Where we're looking at what can you substitute or reduce and buffer with some kind of carbon-based foods so that there is no risk. We know that the addition of some of these carbon products are going to mean that your inputs can drop, but you're still going to get the same effect. So we have that step-by-step process, and it's kind of laid out in the book. And regeneration is not a prescription, but in some ways, having those first steps when this is new to you is really, really important, just to give people confidence. We also encourage people to meet up with each other, meet with someone that's much further along that track to look at, what could I do? What could I do safely? But I do not believe that you should be banking your property on going cold turkey and just removing everything. And I think it's part of what gave organics a bad name, 30 odd years ago, was that people were just pulling everything out of the system, and your system can collapse because you don't have your nitrogen fixing microorganisms or your phosphate solubilizing organisms operating very well in that system. So we like that kind of step-by-step process in the first 3 years so that you're not risking everything. And then you have some people that are not risk averse at all, and they just pull the plug and we get phenomenal results. And I'm like, okay, cool. But we also encourage people just to just trial a couple of acres, or even, we do 1 yard by 1 yard trials. Like, it doesn't have to be huge to start figuring out what's actually going to turn some of these aspects around on my property. Right?
And Nicole, we're finding that, peer-to-peer learning and mentoring is very important. I'd love to hear your thoughts on leadership and coaching, because I know that's a big focus of your training and teaching as well.
Yeah, I think the most I ever learned in my life was not at university. It was in peer-to-peer learning. We had what we called the biological barbecues, and we would go from farm to farm and look at each other's properties. And it was absolutely phenomenal learning, because people were willing, they were vulnerable, they would show their worst fields and their best fields, and we had different expertise involved in that group. I think if we're peer-to-peer learning from people that themselves are all just starting out, then you're limited by what that current knowledge is of the group so far. So having people that kind of push your comfort zone and put in new ideas is worthwhile. Like, I think we can have a peer-to-peer network where you do bring in specialists just to spark something and then send them on their way. And then as a group, how do we solve some of these issues? Because I think farmers have always been the greatest innovators. And I think a lot of modern agriculture took away that innovation piece. We call it the number 8 wire in New Zealand, that ability to fix anything and work anything out. And sometimes you want that little technical spark, and then producers themselves will work out, well, how am I going to solve this? How do I get this coating onto a seed? Or how do I alter and put biologicals, down as a liquid with my seeds? Like, we see that innovation happening on the farm, because right now we're limited by some of the equipment that's able to do that. But I do think peer-to-peer networks are absolutely critical. And I think for a lot of other reasons too. And part of that is just that I feel that we need more support groups for men and women, where you've got people that you can talk to. I think that's really important. In agriculture, we've got very isolated.
We're talking today with Nicole Masters. She is the founder of Integrity Soils. And once again, that web address is integritysoils.com. And Nicole, I wanted to ask you about a specific practice in soil health, and that is the integration of livestock with cropping systems. We've had some guests in the past who have kind of explored that idea that anytime you can, not in every situation, but every time that you have the opportunity to integrate some live animals onto crop ground, that has the potential to improve the soil health. What's your take on that?
I always think it's a case-by-case basis, and I'm very wary of dogma. I'm very wary that anyone that says you have to do this in order to achieve soil health, because we see people doing all sorts of different versions and still getting extraordinary results. So on some large operations where maybe it's not possible to get animals across every acre, is we talk about introducing the essence of cow through either compost or slurries or seed dressings. And then I think it's a starting place, right? Because sometimes that can be a limitation. People feel, oh, I can't build soil health because I don't have livestock, and then that's a limitation in their minds. So it's how do we innovate past that and through that? Would I like to see animals? Yes, but those animals might be encouraging more bird life. It might be encouraging a diversity of other animals rather than just being stuck in the livestock model. But of course we can be earning additional income, but there's also additional time and infrastructure and all those things that come along with livestock. What I'm seeing up here in Montana, which is quite exciting, is a lot of livestock producers now integrating into cropping operations where they're coming in on top, planting a cover crop or cleaning up stubble or whatever that might be, and then just they're both winning out of that situation. No one's paying for those services, like it's just a cooperative, and people are bringing in their own electric wire and their own water to solve those issues, and that's pretty exciting, I think.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, I think a piece of this too is like people feeling like they have to do it all, and it gets really overwhelming. Is like you're doing the best you can, just do this piece well, and then let's see if you want to add something in, but not, there's a real risk of over enterprising and just burning out. Sorry, Mary.
No, and I love that point. We talk a lot about, soil health as a journey, not a destination, and everyone's starting place, middle of the road is different, and their end place is different too. But would be interested just, if you had any other examples. I loved that example of innovation and bringing different producers together in that kind of cooperative model. If you have any other examples that you've seen from your work across the country and innovative soil health implementation.
I have 3 young producers I work with in Western Australia that they're all in their 30s, all running their operations, and they are sharing resources. So one of them is making vermicast, one of them's large scale composting, one is doing rock dusts. And what they're doing is, instead of everybody having to do their own individually, they're doing it more as a collaborative, cooperative, and they're just having the most fun. They're just having the most fun, and it's really cool. I actually need to connect with them again because I hear through the grapevine they're doing really well. And it's just, yeah, I get so busy, and I have all these people I'm connected to that I don't hear from in years, and I'd love to reconnect and see what they're doing. But I think having that, which is one of nature's principles, right? An ecological principle is collaboration instead of competition, is looking at how can I collaborate in my community so that we're not doing everything, if you love worms, then do worms, and maybe your neighbor does love turning compost, then you do that. Or maybe you love making putting on seed dressings, or you want to grow seed for the community. We're seeing a lot of that in New Zealand.
And Nicole, I had a question too. A farmer that I've worked with through the years in the Shenandoah Valley often will start with a question of like, have you ever wondered? And I was just wondering, what piques your curiosity these days?
Oh gosh. Well, so much of what I'm doing right now is training the trainers, right? So what I'm wondering is how quickly can we shift mindset? How little does it take to impact in a community? We're working here in Big Timber, and we calculated over 42% of this land area is now being managed regeneratively using adaptive grazing in a 16-mile radius. We're talking about tipping points of communities. And so I'm really interested in that human piece of what gives people confidence to be able to start to speak up, even if you don't have agreement in a community. The people that really feel grounded and that they can speak their voice is growing. And what we're seeing is this makes so much sense. Like, what's cool about soil health is it's got nothing to do with politics or your belief system. It just makes sense. no matter where you come from and what you're doing. And so we see once there is an uptake and you get people that are confident to share their story, that we see this spreading out in a community. And that's the piece we're hoping to apply for a grant to look at this, Eric, because I think it's absolutely fascinating, and it is a blueprint for things that we can do in other places around the world. Is what support did those farmers and ranchers need, and what support were they offering each other? Anyway, it's very exciting.
Just about a minute remaining in this episode of the podcast. We're talking with Nicole Masters. She is founder of Integrity Soils. And Nicole, my final question is about resources. There's, in this digital age that we live in, of course, we all love books, and we all need to get your book, For the Love of Soil. But do you have any particular favorite when it comes to YouTube channels or digital type resources that people can learn more about soil health?
I mean, I love John Kemp's regenerative agriculture podcast. I think that's phenomenal. There's quite a lot of regenerative investment podcasts that are very good. Gosh, I have so many books that I love, and I think it depends on the resources, what I'm looking for. A lot of our human development stuff, I'm a big fan of Adam Grant. We do subscribe to his podcasts. But yeah, I think you're right. There's just there's so many resources out there that in itself can feel quite overwhelming. Thinking what I love doing is taking, like, say, a sheep producer and going visiting viticulture, or vice versa, is look outside of your sector, because we're finding that a lot of these sectors have already solved some of these issues you might be dealing with. And cropping, you might not be thinking I should talk to a vineyard, but vineyards really have got this pretty well cracked.
Well, thank you very much. Unfortunately, our time is up. Nicole Masters, founder of Integrity Soils. Once again, that web address, integritysoils.com, and the name of her book, For the Love of Soil, Strategies to Regenerate Our Food Production Systems. Thank you, Nicole.
Oh, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. See you soon.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Nicole. Already looking forward to December. It'll be here before we know it.
And that was part 2 of our conversation with Nicole Masters of Integrity Soils. And what Mary was talking about right there at the very end about it'll be here before we know it, December 5th and 6th will be the Virginia Farm to Table Conference. That will be at the Blue Ridge Community College in Wears Cave, Virginia. And briefly, some of the speakers that will be featured at that event, it's a 2-day event, will be Clorinda Farmer C. Stanley of Green Heifer Farms, Nicole Masters of Integrity Soils, Maureen McNamara, Best of LEAP, and also Dr. David Cole, Professor Emeritus with AgriVision LLC and, of course, Virginia Tech, and Elisha Barnes of Pop Sun Farm, and many more speakers, many more topics will be covered. That is the Virginia Farm to Table Conference. You can register online. Go to the Facebook page for Virginia Farm to Table. That is Virginia Farm to Table on Facebook, and there you will see the registration information, and that is coming up December 5th and 6th in Wears Cave, Virginia, at the Blue Ridge Community College. For the Soil, a Conversation is made possible with funding support from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and the Agua Fund. Other partners include the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, Virginia Cooperative Extension, Virginia State University, Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, and partners of the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. Views expressed on this podcast are those of each individual guest. To download a copy of this or any other episode, visit the website forthesoil.org. If you have a specific question about soil health, just contact your local extension office, your local USDA service center, or a Soil and Water Conservation District office. Music used during today's program was provided courtesy of the Flip Charts, all rights reserved. For the Soil, a Conversation is produced by On the Farm Radio in collaboration with Virginia Tech. I'm your host, Jeff Ishee.